Hello chess friends, it's GM Max here, and in this video I'm going to share with you a game I played from the 5th qualifier of the Solo 4-Player Chess World Championship for 2021. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm actually one of the world's best Solo 4-Player chess players. At the time of recording this video, I'm actually ranked number 5 in the world in Solo Blitz chess and also top 20 in free-for-all. So anyway, let's get into the game and I'll show you how this game went and also share some points along the way about how to play better solo chess. Now, I actually played the previous 4 qualifiers, and one thing that was sort of interesting with these qualifiers is I basically tried to play the absolute best moves possible in every position, but what would happen is even though my results were very good and I got a lot of second places, I did miss out on qualifying, like having some bad luck, and also some games I was like one good move off winning and just played like an idiot and lost at some moment. So I had a lot of near misses in this event, but I was still gaining a lot of rating points, and well, basically in this game I decided to go for a different strategy where rather than trying to play the best moves possible, I realized that the key to doing well would be to lower my threat level and to basically try to play like an idiot in a lot of different positions to try to look as stupid as possible. So that way my opponents wouldn't take me seriously and wouldn't go after me thinking that they can just beat me at any time anyway. And then I would, sort of the right moment, I would then take my opportunity, show why I have a Grandmaster title, and then sort of punish them that way. And well, let's see how this strategy worked out. And it turned out, well, in some cases I wasn't just pretending to be a moron, but actually I did play a lot of stupid moves in this game. So you're also going to have a lot of opportunity to see that, well, you can get to a very high solo rating even if you are, let's say, kind of addled in your chess ability with this variant. In any case, let's see, after h3. So obviously what I keep in mind is that in general you want to minimize exchanges. So for that reason, I played the move pawn to d5 instead. The reason I chose d5 rather than d6 is so that if he does try to bring the queen together to go after this pawn, well, at least my pawn is blocking the attack. That's why I chose this square and not the move d6 that I used to play. Of course, the disadvantage is that it does mean that I am a bit vulnerable on this diagonal. So now it's very hard for me to get my bishop out in a good way, at least with e6. So he played d6, and yeah, the guy does go for the queen opening. Of course, Carlos Gabriel is one of the top chess players in this 4-player variant. Of course, I didn't notice because at the time this was an anonymous setting, so he didn't know who each other was. And I kind of used that to my advantage, where I played the move knight to c6. Actually, it's kind of funny. There was actually a game, I think, by the guy who qualified in Qualifier 6, where he played the move like knight f6 and, allowed this queen takes f6. And it was something like really, really stupid like this, where he just ended up getting mated in like 4 moves or something. And this is a guy like who qualified in the 6th qualifier, which is pretty funny. But it shows a good example, like the kind of teaming that sort of happens, that you have to really make sure to minimize checks as much as possible to the opponent's king. So that's why I played the move knight c6 to develop that way. Pawn at c6 might be better in a team's game in order to try and get an attack on this pawn. But because it's solo, I want to have as much development as possible. So I played queen g5, and okay, it's quite obvious at this point that they're trying to go for something like queen f7 and queen to e7. And you can also see that my partner Roadrunner is just basically leaving me to die and is not really trying to coordinate it all with, say, if he played queen here, well, he said he would have the option to try to give some counter checks so that yellow and red wouldn't be able to mate me. But okay, decided, okay, I'm just going to let you die and take my chance to free player. But of course, in this case, of course, I'm not going to pretend to be an idiot in the cases where you actually have to find the best move to win or to survive. So I played knight f6, just blocking the queens from the attack for now. And he played this pawn move, which is a very thematic idea when the knight is here, that you want to try and go after the knight and probably gain a tempo. Because a lot of the winning in solo is actually kind of like in teams, where you want to coordinate attacks so that when you're attacking another guy, the other guy is also backing you up in the attack, the guy that's opposite you, which for me is the green player. But as you can see, after the move h4, well, he played knight f6, you can see he's not really making any effort to try to attack at all. Otherwise, he might have tried something else, but okay, to be fair, knight f6 is not really a fair move to criticize. The opportunities will come later. So I played h6, it's a move I would play anyway to stop the pawn, and it also makes him lose another tempo of the queen. Because the problem with this kind of queen moves by white, yellow, and red is that if they're not able to coordinate an attack very well and really weaken one of us, the problem is that then you're losing a lot of tempi, and meanwhile black is we're getting a lot of good developing moves for the middle game to have an advantage there. Well, I played bishop e6, which again is just sort of making sure this pawn is protected and trying to take some of the sting out of queen to c6 as well, which could potentially be annoying in some moments. So he plays the bishop out, the knight moves here, so he's opening up a potential check if he needs it. And black in turn moves the queen back, and actually it's the point where he's threatening to go takes and then to mate here. And actually it's the point where I kind of saw this the instant I made my move, where I played my move a bit too fast, and then played the move of rook to b8, and in a way it probably did me a favour, because I probably thought, okay, this guy's obviously not a good player, he's just some beginner who can't see basic mate threats. But it kind of worked out in my favour in the end, because, well, I mean, he should just play queen here. Like, I'm absolutely stunned that he didn't play this way, because, well, green doesn't really have a good counter, in fact, because he doesn't have some check or anything to try and go for this, because the pawn is blocked, and, you know, after some move, like, he would just have, you know, queen takes, and, I mean, he'd get the mate without even actually losing the, you know, without even losing the queen as such. So, as you can see, like, yeah, rook b8 was kind of a incredibly stupid move, and, like, I wasn't being modest when I said that, like, I was playing like a complete moron in most of these games, but luckily I managed to get away with it, because my opponent, I think Yellow, just assumed I was going to play queen d7 without thinking, which is what I should have done to block the check. And so he played this move, and, you know, after this, and knight here, like, at this point they just stopped taking me seriously. Like, instead of going after me, I thought, okay, blue is such a atrocious solo player that we can, like, just go after green and basically just win against blue. Like, even if blue has 3 queens, we'll still beat him. This is probably what was going through their head at the time, and, well, that's actually exactly what I wanted my opponents to think, and it's also why I played moves like sort of not developing the bishop on f8 for a very long time, because I want to think, okay, he doesn't know development, he's just some beginner, like some 1200 rated player. Well, I did play like a 1200 player in this game, so it wasn't completely off. So he had a3, he played h5, and, you know, these moves are often are very good moves to play in the middle, in the opening, because it gives you really good space in the long term, just on that side of the board to make it hard for him to attack. Of course, because yellow and red went for the queen moves together, it meant I didn't really get the chance to get my pawns where I wanted them as such, because I had to focus more on defense. But okay, it's not the end of the world either, and, well, you can see I played knight e4. I could have considered a move like a5, but I was a little bit worried that he might try some sort of knight a5 move to troll me. So I thought, okay, let's just play this random knight move, which is solid, but at the same time, you know, kind of make sure that I think, okay, this guy's just a beginner because he's not developing his pieces, is what I was going for. But okay, a6 at least is trying to hold back the move b5, and I was a little bit nervous they would try some coordinated attack, like trying to take my knight and attack the other knight. But somehow I never really got around to it, because green was basically weakening himself quite a bit, and he was able to exploit that very well. So after the bishop development and knight back, I was actually very surprised he played the knight back. I thought that was a mistake, and that he should have played a move knight here. I mean, probably the reason green didn't try to attack red is because he thought, okay, this blue guy is a beginner who doesn't know how to coordinate. But actually, if he had played this, I would have been quite willing to team with him. I mean, for example, he plays, I don't know, some move like, let's say, bishop to f8, trying to defend. You know, I'd be very willing to play some idea like, let's say, knight takes a5 even at some moment. And then he goes knight g7, and we kind of go for some coordinated attack in this sort of way. I mean, some I would have been willing to sort of eventually entertain to play with the tempo. But, okay, he decided not to do that. He decided to play more passive, and, well, it kind of cost him the game. And knight 7 against a move that it looks kind of really stupid. And, I mean, the idea was to try to get the knight in for an attack somehow, and to make it harder for black to develop. By, say, if b6, I can put the knight on a6 and annoy him that way. So that was kind of the idea, was just to sort of play a move that's annoying, but also looks like a beginner could have played it as well. So anyway, the game saw bishop here, and you can see he's already going after this weak pawn on f7. And probably at this point, yeah, e6 is a very sensible move, but we kind of see that around this point that the plays start to really coordinate against green. And you're knight d6 against a move saying, okay, I'm not going to let you take. I'm just going to maneuver my knight in a sort of stupid looking way, so you don't think I'm a decent player. So he had to move pawn here, black pushed his pawn up. I mean, basically what happened, he ended up having a lot of problems with these pieces, so maybe instead of d5, perhaps a move like bishop e7 is more solid. Because that way, if a move knight does come in, at least you can sort of take and sort of minimize your problems that way. And it also kind of does dissuade the knight coming in if it's leading to a lot of exchanges of the black pieces. So maybe this was a better try in the position. Well, anyway, he played d5. Black pushed his pawn, and yeah, actually the move knight b5 I think was a mistake here. I think in this position what I should do instead is probably put my knight here and go after the pawn this way, because then it means that they can't really coordinate easily to attack here if I'm making threats against red. I mean, it is true enough, something like, let's say, knight here, that, you know, after some normal move, black can certainly, well, red can certainly take my knight here, but then he also lost his bishop, so it kind of was a good trade for me on material. And black can also try to be annoying, in, rather, green can try to be annoying in different ways, like, for example, even just a move like bishop d6 could be quite decent, so after takes and takes, well, then he's still able to take this pawn and try to say that black king is kind of weak on both flanks. I think that would have been quite a reasonable approach into the position. But instead, the game went a bit differently, where I decided to play knight b4, which was, not a good move at all. I was hoping to have some sort of this move like this, where my idea was that red would make some threat against green make some threat against red's position, and then I would sort of take, and there'd be some sort of double threat that would really mess red up, but somehow it never really happened because my opposite didn't really coordinate with me. So I've an idea to play like bishop d6, which, okay, is a reasonable idea to go after the pawn, to be fair. But here was where I made a big mistake, because I kind of underestimated that yellow and red were really teaming like completely fully at this point. If I know what they were going for, I probably would have just played some move like, I don't know, c6 and kind of just sat on this position and kept this in reserve. The reason I played move knight b6 at this moment is I was also very nervous that maybe he goes b5 at some moment and hits the knight. But since that's covered by the rook, that really wasn't something to fear, and it shows I really wasn't in a very good head state. I mean, I'd also try, I was listening to a song that I probably shouldn't have while playing this game that was not really like helping me to think clearly. But I played knight here, and what I completely didn't consider at all is that he would play the move queen takes. Like, it just didn't even occur to me that this move was legal. But of course, like, it's very obvious that like with them teaming that they really should coordinate against green. Because if you eliminate green at this point, basically it means that they'll be able to easily queen pawns on their side, and with me on the middle, I'll be coming under attack on both fronts. So it's very much in yellow and red's interest to really eliminate green as quickly as possible. And also getting rid of my knight, which is nice. So around this point, he went knight g5, and you would have seen if I had saved this for like one more move, and like say when the queen had moved away, then obviously this would be a lot more effective when you have the double attack. But it didn't happen that way, and now black was in time to defend, or rather red was in time to defend. I thought, okay, let's put the knight here, and I mean, the one good thing about playing this knight here is that I think that the players realize, okay, we've got like the good players playing with green, with red, and with yellow, and blue is probably some random 1500 dude who like, or 1600 dude with a 1200 rating. And so they just stopped paying attention to me after this point. And so I decided, let's be a bit annoying and just play like a one move attack, which, okay, at least you have a double threat, but to be fair, the players dealt with it very well, where the guy played bishop here to attack the queen, so that green couldn't coordinate, let's say like knight takes f7 or something. And then at this point, after black played pawn to b6, which is probably a mistake, probably putting the queen here out of the range of the other attacking pieces was probably the better move, in fact. But instead, after b6, we had queen here, and always see that obviously the players are not going to trade queens together, they're using it for the attack. And so I played knight f5 again, sort of saying, okay, I'm just going to play a weak-looking move just to sort of, make myself look weaker than I really am. And then after takes like this was a very nice idea by yellow to coordinate the attack as such. So then after pawn takes, sort of saying, I have nothing better with the queen under attack. Instead, I'm not really sure what else actually you can really do. I think that already the position is probably just kind of losing. Maybe there's some clever idea, like maybe you can go queen b6 and try to at least sort of trade off this queen in some way. But obviously it doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence. So after pawn takes, it's just all the attacks are kind of coming together, where this rook is under attack, the knight's under fire. And then I played the move c6, because I realized that if I play the move queen takes, that I'm going to run into queen takes, and then there's going to be a bishop to d7 move, and then I'm basically just getting destroyed, and they're going to turn on me. So I realized I had to just focus on defense and let green die, and hope that I could survive the freeway later. So after the knight comes in, then black played the move knight f5, which actually I think was a mistake. Like, probably, I'm not really sure what to suggest, because position's very, very bad, but at least if you play bishop f8, I mean, at least you sort of have some chance maybe, but I guess you can still take and kind of go queen c5 after. And because I position my piece very passively, I'm not really in a position to stop them from doing that. So probably to be fair, the position might already be beyond salvation, because, I basically deliberately left green to sort of die here. And it's true that sort of from a, let's say, game theory saying that if, let's say, all four players are playing optimally, this is a very bad strategy. But I know from playing a lot of solo games between Qualifier 4 and Qualifier 5 in a 1 week, that basically, I noticed that in a lot of games, the people who are really the stupidest player actually often won. So I realized that a key to winning this game was basically to play like the dumbest player of the four, and then they would sort of basically say, okay, we're going to go after green because blue is no threat anyway. So after takes, I played this move g5 thinking, okay, this guy's taking the rook, it's obviously to go for something like queen takes f5, or some other attacking move where black is not going to take the red queen. So therefore I don't have to be worried about the move of taking en passant this way, which of course would be strategically very good for white to open his rook and also to weaken my king. Because one thing I find is often underestimated in 4-player chess, that it's often a very good idea to open up a file early, like trade a pawn, so that your rooks can join the attack fast. And we see that black has done that, that red has done that quite well here. Where we had knight a6 and after takes, I'm not sure what else you can really do. Like, I think that green is already just busted. Like, in free-for-all, he would actually kind of have a chance, because they might decide to turn on me when I get a bit stronger. But in this case, I said, nah, let's just go after this guy. So I played bishop g7. Again, I didn't want to sort of risk c5 and, you know, weakening my king to some sort of attacks as such on these diagonals. So I just kept on playing like normal development bishop here and, well, saying, okay, I'm just going to let green die. And, okay, I know if like Roadrunner as well, she'll be kind of annoyed that I sort of let him to do this, but of course I didn't know it was him. If I known it was him cornering, I might have actually tried to help him a bit more, but anyway. After it takes a knight in, you can sort of see, yeah, that there's just too many different threats. I decided to castle these to get my king to safety and to get myself ready for the coming, like, free player scenario. So he decides to take the knight and, okay, he's losing this one on next turn. Now, the best move objectively is probably to play bishop here and to continue, like, trying to team, but even though I saw this move, I decided not to play because I thought, okay, if I played it, kind of gives them an alert that I might be a somewhat competent player. So I thought, okay, let's just play king h8 and just look like I'm a beginner that has no idea what I'm doing, but still playing to keep my king very safe to get ready for the freeway. So that when they do get to the free player scenario, then it means that yellow and red are going to go after each other instead of going after me, is the idea. And as you might notice, I've deliberately kept my points low, and I've done that also again to make sure that basically to make sure I'm not seen as a threat, but still to have enough material that I can try to win. And I sort of noticed actually before this, because Qualifier, what I did was I actually played for a lot of the games for the top two Solo Blitz players, Grafeben and Cha Real Smooth. And I noticed that they had this approach where I would kind of just play like very solidly in the opening, just develop normally. And then I would just try to queen as many pawns as possible like a maniac. And I first went, well, okay, this is sort of something that beginners normally do. But then I realized it's actually kind of not so silly because the other guys are so busy doing random stuff or like trying to attack each other. But often you can just sneak a pawn through because they're just not paying attention to you. And that's kind of what happened in this game actually, where they could have stopped me queening, but it's amazing how many times in solo there'll be a position where the best move is to stop one player from queening the pawn, and the guys just don't try to stop it at all, and you just get a free queen. And it's even better actually, because at this point, well, I can't really save him anyway from the queen to checkmate here, so I didn't even try. I just already got ready for the free player. And I mean, it's well worth actually getting the 20 points for the checkmate to lose the queen, because even in this case, I mean, if green, yellow, and red coordinate against me later, well, even though I have an extra queen and, well, a couple of an extra, like, bishop, as it were, and some pawns, like, even in spite of that, still, if they both attack me at once, obviously, two players playing against one is not a very even battle, even with the material for black. So, okay, well, let's just try and get as many queens as possible, because they're going to attack me whether I do it or not. So, okay, let's get the queens, put the queens on very solid squares, so that if they try to attack me, they kind of sink their own game. That's what I was going for, to get to a situation where, basically, in order for them to beat me, they also have to lose themselves. And it kind of worked out quite alright, as you'll see. So he played the knight out. I'll talk a little bit faster about these moves now at the free play stage. So I put the queen here, just sort of trying to, well, be annoying and go for some cheap tricks, hoping that they wouldn't see it. I know it's actually quite amazing, like, again, when I was looking at the games of, like, Cha in particular, and also Grafeben. And there were so many positions where I would just play some random, like, one-move attack, or, like, play some... Basically, they basically positioned themselves so that they were in the best position to take free pieces or something, I noticed. Which might seem kind of funny, because you wouldn't think that a top solo players would put pieces on pre, but actually in this tournament, there are a lot of games where I just put my queen on pre. So I think that's actually quite a good, smart strategy that might distinguish the very best players from the let's say, next ones in solo. It's just having that ability to maximize the opponent's chance to put a piece on pre, in a sense. Which I know might sound a little bit arrogant, but it seems to be what I observed from these players' games. At this point, also another point is that I think that the older version of me, or let's say not older isn't the right word, but the version of me in the past, like the past version of myself, would probably have tried really hard to stop red on yellow from queening. But I kind of realize, well, if they get a queen, they're not going to go after me, because my king is very safe. They're going to go after each other and try to win. Because basically they're in a situation where, like, let's say if green checkmates, if red checkmates yellow, then, like, he gets more points and basically wins. If yellow checkmates red, they get more points, way more points, and just wins. So it's a situation where it's kind of not really in their best interest to go after me, at least for red. I mean, admittedly, for yellow, like, it does actually make sense for him to try and go after me, but the problem is he doesn't have the material to make it happen. I think it was around this point I did something really stupid and, like, blundered a queen or something. I mean, it's true that, like, I'm sort of, again, leaving the piece open, and, of course, objectively, it's not a good idea. But the reason I do it is, again, to try and make myself look like I have no idea about my opponent's threats, and to make him think I'm very, very weak, and that, okay, these two guys... It's not like you're yellow red, I think, okay, we're both really strong, so we need to take each other out, and then rely on playing blue later. Which maybe is not optimal, but it's what happened. So I pushed a pawn saying, okay, they're probably going to let me queen, because they just, like, think I'm just a weak player, just trying to queen pawns, and with, like, no real strategy whatsoever outside of trying to queen. But little did they know they were playing with a GM here. So they moved the rook, which was a smart idea to get out of the way of an attack here, and make sure everything is well protected. I mean, at least yellow's position is quite solid as well here. So it may try to incentivize red to try and attack me, but again, he doesn't really have the material to do it. And we kind of see in this case, well, now, red got a queen, but I also got 3 queens, and, well, it's sort of a situation where the game starts to go a bit crazy, where I remember they, like, start just going after me over and over, and actually it's what they should do, because, I mean, if they don't attack me now, like, my 3 queens are just going to win the game. But I also realize, like, I'm in a position where I would kind of have to sack one of my queens or more in order to win. I mean, this game is quite a long one. It does go for, what, 110 moves. So it doesn't mean I should fast forward past some certain points of it. But we can sort of see that now what yellow is doing is he's trying to keep his position solid and trying to get another queen. But we can also see that my queens are actually doing a good job of stopping the other side queening. So I'm in a very good spot. And probably around this point, I think I could have played it a lot better than I did. I mean, for example, maybe a move like... I don't know, even a move like putting the queen here could be kind of decent. Just getting out of the way of any attacks, and I think then putting a queen on f6 or something would be just very solid. But instead I sort of tried hard to pretend to be a weak player that actually became a weak player in this game. So I had queen here, pawn here. Actually, I still can't believe the ending of this game. Like, it was just completely insane. I don't think he should have pushed the pawn necessarily. Like, I can't understand he was afraid of my queen coming in, but I'm not sure if this was necessarily the best. Because in the long term, it does mean he's a lot more open when he pushes the pawn. And here I think I probably played a little bit too defensively. Like, the one idea I saw, and if the old me would have gone knight here, just sacked on east here and just basically tried to finish off yellow. That's the approach I probably should have gone for, but then again, maybe there's still red teams against me, so maybe it doesn't change that much in the end. But I think I should have at least tried to attack maybe, rather than just sitting defensively. Because what happens at some point, they just start turning on me, realizing, okay, if we don't do something, then blue is just going to win. And I kind of see around this point where we sort of see red gets 2 queens, and it's kind of a weird situation, like I have the most material, but the least points by far. Red has almost as much material, but has less points than yellow, which has a lot more material. I think in this position, probably, like, I'd say yellow has a very good chance to win objectively. But then the game started taking really crazy turns. I mean, queen here was probably a very dumb move. I think that instead I should play... Actually, it's an interesting question, because still this king is actually rather safe if I can't get this pawn. So maybe what I should do is I should maybe actually play a move like b6 here. Just trade the pawn and just try to get my rook active, potentially on this file. And also, let's say if he does play, like, I don't know, it also kind of incentivizes him to play a move like, let's say, rook here, so that then either red will lose the queen, or I'll kind of get to take a pawn and maybe try to open up the attack on c7 that way. I think that would have been a much better move, and I really tried to play way too safely at this point. So, in any case, we had the queen here, and he after takes, I tried to sort of coordinate the attack against yellow, trying to support red, but it didn't really work out that well. After takes, I think I did some really stupid move here. Actually, knight b4 is probably not so bad, but then around here it started to really turn against me. Oh yeah, that's right, he ended up blundering the queen, and yeah, this is where it started to get really, really weird. Where around this point, I think that if I just put the queen back on a safe square, like let's say I play, I don't know, a move like rook to d8 and just put my queen on d6, I'm pretty sure that I would probably win this position just by keeping everything safe, but instead I kind of did something really stupid around this point. Knight c2 actually kind of worked out okay, because he didn't go after me and didn't try coordinate attack with this sort of like, these sort of ideas, but anyway, we moved the rook, and yeah, it was around here I think I did something incredibly stupid. Yeah, I played this knight here. Actually, even this is still probably okay. But yeah, it was around... I've got an exact move, but... Oh yeah, this was a move where I just played like a complete beginner. Where instead of doing this, I should actually play a little bit differently. I mean, I probably already misplayed it quite a bit, but the move I wanted to play initially was rook here. But again, I didn't play because I thought it would make me look too clever, but actually it's very important in order to weaken the black king, because if I don't, then it's going to be very hard to attack him in the long term. I think what I was worried about is that he would play something like rook here, and then he would sort of take. But even then, I think it's still worth getting rid of the knight, even losing knight, even to get rid of this pawn as well. Or for that, I could even just play a move like queen here, and still just go for the attack, like still threatening this pawn and still having various checks in the agenda as well. And that, because I feel like with 3 queens, it should still be an easy win. Like, even if they sort of team up and take 1 or 2 of my queens, it's going to take off some of their pieces as well. So I think it's going to be very hard for him to catch up somehow, but you never know, there is still a chance. I mean, of course, solo chess is pretty crazy and unpredictable in general. But yeah, taking the pawn was just very, very stupid. I mean, I should be removing pieces from red, not from yellow here, because red has more material than yellow does. So he played knight here, and yeah, I just missed this bishop move, which is just a very good move, I think. I mean, at this point, I think, well, I moved the queen here, which is like an absolutely horrible square for the queen. What I should do instead is I should put the queen on this square probably on d6, actually. Because that way it means that if he takes, well, okay, he can try to take the knight or take the rook, but it doesn't really lead to a big problem. But no, instead I, like, put the queen on a light square, just like absolute beginner move as such. Where, of course, he plays bishop here, which I didn't see. And, well, okay, at this point, like, basically I lose one of my queens. And, okay, I'm still winning, but now, like, it's not as simple. And now I just make more and more bad moves. Like, I really did play, like, this game, like, so badly. Like, I think that, like, I would have probably played this game better if I'd been, like, 5 years old. But, in any case, the game went rook here. I put the rook on d8, which, okay, this at least gets the rook active. He defends his bishop, and, you know, black's is moving back and red's moving back and forth. And, you know, maybe I should have put my queen in to go for the attack, because that also, it's not just an attacking move, but also kind of makes him harder to defend, or to attack me if he's having to worry about his king. But yeah, I decided to keep the queen for, yeah, after this I did play this move in the end, funnily enough. But I remember it ended up costing me later, actually, where after king scared, I did some really bad move. Yeah, I put the knight here, which, yeah, I'm not so sure about, actually. Maybe I should play to attack the rook instead, because that way I can also try to defend that knight later, and sort of do 2 things at once. But no, instead I decide to just make more and more blunders. Like, this limits some ability to rook, which is just a very bad idea. And after this pawn move, yeah, it just all starts to go very downhill for me around this point. Like, rook here is, again, the wrong approach. Like, I was trying to checkmate this yellow player, saying that, okay, they'll have enough material to beat red. But in hindsight, like, the king is always able to run away. Like, I'm not really going to have a mate. Instead, I should be going after, I think, red in this position. But it's hard to do it in this point. I mean, maybe the best option is just to play some move, like maybe bring the knight back and trying to use the knight in the attack somehow. But, okay, it's not so easy, admittedly, but at least I'm stopping his pawn from queening. So it's that as a bonus. Well, instead I moved the rook here, and, well, I just kind of, yeah, I mean, this was just completely idiotic. Like, there's no way I should allow the rook to even possibly come here. I should just bring the queen back to safety and try to defend. I think I was still hoping for some kind of fluke mate, which was really not justified. So I played queen here, king here. He gets a queen, and yeah, of course. I mean, take here was also a very stupid move, I think. Like, I should just put the... Actually, it's hard to know what else I'd do in a way, because if I do play this, he's probably not going to take the queen, in fact. He's probably going to play something like rook here, and then queen here, and, you know, probably it's even worse than what happens in the game. Amazingly, such a thing does seem to actually be possible. So instead, I think they actually probably have already just blundered. You know, I'm allowing him to play takes, and yeah, now once these rooks are coordinating, like, my king is very close to getting mated. And I think my position is just basically lost at this point. But somehow by some fluke, I managed to still stay in the game. Where I played this move of this, which, yeah, is just a very serious blunder here. Because after this, well, he can move and now he's still attacking my queen. So my check achieved absolutely nothing here. I played rook here, just, again, another completely moronic move. Because it allows rook f8 and it will take my queen. Instead, I should put the queen here, and that would be a much more safe approach. It also gives the option to try to go after the king this way, so it would be much more sensible. But yeah, instead of that, I played this absolutely beginner's move. And of course, after this check... And I'm very lucky, actually, that, yeah, that it's not even worse. That, like, rook d8 was kind of a silly move by him. Like, if he plays, like, rook to f4, then, I mean, he's just going to coordinate the attack of, like, rook to e7. Actually, yeah, rook e7 would be even better, because then it's just a forced mate, you know, with king here. Bishop at e6, and yeah, the mate is going to be coming pretty soon. Okay, to be fair, maybe can still take the rook, but yeah, I guess in this case I could probably take here, and yeah, it's just going to be GG. Well, anyway, instead of doing this and just taking me out of the picture immediately, for some reason he decided to give up the rook. Like, maybe he was thinking that red was going to coordinate with takes, but instead red didn't. And when he took my queen, well, I took his rook. And at this point, yeah, I mean, the game is one where basically, I think at this point, like, red has more points and he has, well, he has some more, not to say more material because I do have the queen, but he has the attack on my king. The fact that black king is, the red king is much safer does mean it's very hard for me to get any sort of play here. You know, red has such strong initiative. And with bishop e6, yeah, he's trying to coordinate some mating attack. But he decides to take the pawn instead. And, well, we see it now, you know, the players, well, yellow and red are doing a good job of coordinating together. I decided to give a check, sort of saying, well, okay, let's try and hold back yellow. I mean, this was kind of really stupid. Like, I really should be going after red in this position. So a move like, for example, say putting the queen here and kind of going after both players was probably better. But actually, yeah, it's one good thing about the way I played it. It's basically, it doesn't make me look so stupid to play a check and weaken my king. Then again, I start thinking, okay, this guy is just some really weak player. So the real battle is actually between yellow and against blue and against red. So it kind of worked out for me in the end, but it is true that the king is very safe and it kind of blocks all the checks. Actually, it would have been kind of interesting for him to try and move like bishop e2, but I don't think it really does all that much in the end. So anyway, he played the rook here, going for a mate with rook to this square. I have the coordinates turned off for some reason, so yeah, I can turn them back on. It's okay, that makes it easier to say what the actual moves are. So I admitted my mistake and said, okay, my check was really stupid, so I'm just going to put the rook back and admit the mistake. And after king here, yeah, he now starts to try to go for a mating attack. Actually, I thought he might try and move like rook here and just try to mate me, because I don't really have a very good defense to this. I mean, I can put the queen on this square, but it still looks pretty bad. Because, I mean, if red mates me, or mates what's called yellow for that matter, well, then it means that basically he wins the game by force. So I think he should actually be trying to checkmate me rather than just going after pawns. Well, I decided to go queen here and sort of show up a potential disadvantage of this move. And I was sort of banking on the fact that he wouldn't play this move of knight here. Like, it was sort of a gamble, but if he does play this, he basically wins because, yeah, he's hitting this guy and this guy. I don't have any good checks along here. Well, actually, I guess I can play a move like rook here and I can try to get some counterplay. But yeah, I mean, it's a position where I feel like it should be still very good for red. Because, I mean, my king is way too open, I think, for me to have a real fighting chance, realistically. But instead, he brings the knight back. And now after that, I mean, now it's actually, you know, one where I can go after the king and say, well, I'm still in it. Because, I mean, I do still have the most material after all, even though I have way less points. But I have so few points, I think they stopped really considering me as a big threat, and I kind of worked in my favour. Well, okay, it's not entirely true, because he did bring the rook here to try to check me. So I decided, okay, I'm going to check him back and hope that somehow that yellow is going to coordinate with me to try and stop red. Because, I mean, at one point, actually, I noticed often in 4-player chess, the knight and bishop are actually not necessarily worse than the queen when you get these more sort of fixed kind of tight positions. Because these two pieces are very good defenders, more so than a queen would be. Anyway, I moved the king back, and after knight d4, I put the queen here. But just trying to be annoying as much as possible and saying, well, okay, you can give a check, but at least I'm going to cover it with the queen. So if you play that way, well, then we both lose is kind of the argument. And that's actually one thing sometimes underestimated in solo, that at least when you're playing against some with slightly competent players, well, they'll sort of realize, okay, if I play this way, then maybe I lose, but he's going to lose, but I'm going to lose as well. As I'll kind of avoid those cases, and you can use it to your advantage. Definitely having the free mind to understand what your opponent is going for. It's definitely very important for being successful in this variant. So he brought the bishop out, and yeah, he brought the check in. I put the king on this square, and I was so nervous actually at this point that he would play something like bishop here, and then play a move like rook to this check, because that basically gives mate on the next move. At the same time, it's actually true that yellow wouldn't do that, because giving red the checkmate, well, would mean that red wins by force, because he gets an extra 20 points with the mate. So actually it can sort of means that they're not going to coordinate, and that's kind of good news for my king. But I guess he could try, well, in the end, instead of bishop here, actually, what did he play? I feel like I've got the position wrong somehow. Well, okay, we had this, and okay, it is actually what happened. He did actually put the bishop here, but actually that's a decisive mistake, because if he does put the rook here, actually, it's not entirely true. He can still move the bishop away like here, and that does sort of undo the mate, but it does give him still this mate. So actually, yeah, it's kind of funny, like, red actually missed a mate in 2 in this position that just ends the game on the spot. Or actually, I could put the king here, in fact. So that's kind of a obvious point I missed. But okay, so after here, I guess you can still play the check, but okay, at least it's not a mate anymore. So I guess that is that sort of means that, okay, red didn't have a forced win, but he could have set a trap, and I think he didn't really lose anything by going for this, at least, because it's not like I'm doing much in the process. But yeah, instead he played the rook here, and okay, decided to take the queen, which, to be fair, is also pretty good. I mean, Now he has more points and he has more material. But the thing with these 4-player games is that once one side has, especially solo, which is winner takes all, where, only one player gains the points, the one with the most points at the end of the game. Well, it kind of means that in this sort of situation, well, now what's going to happen is that basically blue and yellow are going to tag team the king, the tag team red. And so it means that actually, in a way, he's kind of actually sealed his own fate, where it actually would have been better to, well, sort of go after my king and leave my queen on the board, because that would incentivize yellow then to go after me rather than going after red to some extent. So anyway, now I play this sort of still kind of pretending to go after yellow, so that red will kind of leave me alone. Because he thinks, okay, well, basically if blue is constantly going after yellow like a complete noob, well, in that case, he's obviously not going after me, so let's work together. And so I kind of use that to my advantage, like continuing to attack yellow so that you're not going to, play rook f7 and make my king by force, which is probably what he should do here. But then the game starts to get really weird around this point. Like, he plays the rook move, and then I just take this bishop saying, yeah, whatever, I'm not going to let you get that mating pattern. And then after the pawn moves, yeah, the game just gets more and more crazy. Like, I play this rook move saying, okay, if you take the rook, we're going to let this guy queen, and, well, it kind of worked out well, because now I sort of managed to shift the balance of the game to the point where, okay, now it's green it's yellow that has the most points, that has the most material by far, but it turns out that red has the most points, so I'm kind of in this way forcing red to team with me, because now after this and rook back, like, if he does take my rook, the problem is that neither of us have enough material to then deal with yellow, because yellow just has way more than both of us combined. So in a way, I'm kind of, forcing red to team with me by basically sort of playing like, by going for this sort of very brutal attack. So he keeps the rook to try to get some checks, but then I play the rook here, sort of trying to be annoying and saying, well, okay, I'm actually going to work with you now, red, and try to attack some of the pieces. Actually, the move queen c7 might still be worth even giving up the knight for, potentially, because it does at least manage to weaken black's king quite a lot. But he decides to keep the knight, which, to be fair, is probably also reasonable. I mean, I guess you could have played the knight here instead, because your queen is covering the check, and you also have this pawn covered. But maybe he was nervous about something like rook here and rook here trying to coordinate, which he might have been a bit nervous about, perhaps. In any case, the game went differently with the knight coming here, and, well, I took the pawn because at this point I'm way behind red on point, so I actually need to take some pieces just in order to have a fighting chance and be able to win when it gets to the 1v1. Because if they have more than 20 points than I do in the 1v1, well, I can just claim the win automatically, and that's that. So he brings the bishop around, and, yellow realizes that, well, okay, I have more material, so if I can mate the king here, it's going to be over. But it's not quite that simple, as you'll see. We're now after knight here and rook here. So here is where I played the rook move again, sort of saying, okay, you're not going to take my rook, because that's going to sink both our games. But also going to play where it kind of, again, makes me look like a really weak player, so they're not going to go after me saying, okay, the guy only has a rook and a few pawns, and he's probably some 1200 dude. So I'm just going to leave him be and just sort of go after yellow, who's actually a half-decent player. That's, again, that sort of thing where I managed to lower my threat level to a point where he didn't even take me seriously. Well, to be fair, yellow did take me kind of seriously, because he realized if he mates me, he wins. And yellow's very lucky that he didn't sort of take and play queen here, but if he does that, I mean, in that case, like, yellow's just going to have so much material, he'll just win. So again, I managed to sort of disincentivize red to taking any of my pieces. But still, I play this rook move here again. There's a move to say, okay, I'm going to work with you and make sure that you're not, that I'm not going to take your rook. So kind of saying to red, I'm actually on your side after all, in a sense. So after the bishop moves, I think he was nervous about some capture, but I don't think it was really a problem. So he plays the bishop here, and black takes the pawn, and like if I was playing as yellow, I think I would try to sort of just attack this king as much as possible, like give some checks, maybe even play a move like pawn here, trying to encourage us to turn on each other. But anyway, the game saw bishop here, he took the pawn, and at this point, this is why I started thinking, maybe I actually have a chance to win this game, because I'm basically using the fact I'm the weakest player to my advantage. I mean, and one thing, like, if you notice, like, a lot of my strategies in 4-player chess actually are inspired by Survivor. I've noticed that there's a lot of similarity between chess and the game of Survivor in terms of, like, this psychology and sort of making yourself appear like lesser a threat and sort of teaming and making alliances with the other players. So I guess the fact that I've watched all 40 Survivor seasons definitely does help me to, well, handle these situations better than, say, other Grandmasters by comparison who aren't, super fans of this season, aren't super fans of Survivor. But anyway, we have Queen here. And yeah, you can see that now that yellow kind of makes a sort of common mistake where he starts giving lots of random checks but not really coordinating the pieces together. Now, to be fair, I think there's a position where if you do combine these pieces, I mean, it actually turns out these pieces are much more valuable than just 2 rooks and a knight, because we can sort of basically both make threats consecutively. So it means the material is still kind of somewhat in balance here. So okay, red starts going after yellow, because yellow is the big threat. And yeah, yellow was so nervous that it was just going to mate me somehow, but luckily for me, at this point he doesn't play the... Well, he plays the move queen here because he didn't want to allow this sort of rook f7 check, I guess. But anyway, he plays queen here. Black pushes the pawn, and, well, at this point again, I sort of realized that around this point that, well, this, red player has quite a lot of points here. And yeah, after rook here, like, obviously I'm not going to let the guy just take the rook and just be ahead of material for both of us. So you know, I decided to be smart and coordinate with him, you know, finally showing, okay, I'm not as weak a player as I seemed. But now this moment after he takes knight is a very interesting one, because now we can kind of see, well, in reality, actually, that the red player actually doesn't have many more, is actually in almost as good a position as yellow is here. Because even though yellow has a queen versus a rook, the pawns are really overvalued when it comes to, or very highly valued when it comes to late game. Because the way you're going to win such a position is basically by promoting one of your pawns to a queen. And obviously, the yellow's one pawn is not really going anywhere. Whereas these three pawns, you know, obviously they can all become a queen. So I decided to take this pawn and kind of turn on him again, saying, well, okay, I'm just going to open up your queen so when it gets to a later game, and I have a queen promoting somehow, or a rook, well, I can give you checks whenever I need to make sure that the balance stays the same. Like, the concept of balance is very important. You want to make sure that not one player gets too far ahead, because if they do get too far ahead, they're just going to win the game easily. So after the queen check, well, it ensures I actually kept my pawn alive. And here's why I play this rook move, and again, it's sort of a very deliberate sacrifice, where at first that might seem like, okay, I just blundered the queen check, but I actually decided I want to deliberately let him take my pawns in order to make him think, okay, this guy is just a beginner, and also to give me still options to check his king, so I could kind of backstab him at the moment when he least expects it. And that's actually kind of what happened in the game, where after the check, well, black took the pawn, and then after king 8, or took the dead piece. It's really out that with these dead pieces, you don't gain points from taking them. You only get points from taking live pieces, including a zombie king, where you get 20 points for taking the zombie king. So after the queen moves, actually this isn't technically a zombie king, like, because he's still in the game, but you get the idea. If there was only a king left, it would be a zombie king if the player had resigned. So after rook c2, we can kind of see already that, well, that he's suddenly ended up a little bit overworked. And after the queen check, yeah, it's kind of a fun point, actually, where I think this queen check might have been a mistake, where I think that the correct move is actually to put the bishop on this square. And the reason for doing it is to try to sort of guard yourself against attack, to try to make it harder to sort of grow after the queen, as it were. Although it's true, I probably could still play this move anyway, and, you know, we could certainly, you know, coordinate with something like rook g3, you know, rook f6, and, you know, we could certainly play something like this where, you know, it's a situation where, well, I do have the most material, and actually we'll see something very similar to this happen in the game, in fact. But anyway, as it turned out, the game went with queen e6, and yeah, this rook move was a very smart move, actually, by red, because he realized that now, if he does take the rook, which is actually what happened in the game, to be honest, I think that probably already at this point, yellow's kind of lost, because even though he's the only one with a queen, which is something that people tend to overvalue in a game, like if one side has a queen, then all our players will sort of gang up thinking, oh, the queen is such a strong piece, but I would say that actually the rook and knight are probably better than the queen in this position. I mean, in a certain extent, I feel like this is kind of a bit of a kingmaker situation. And I think if that yellow doesn't take the rook, I think that black just takes my pawns, queen's my own, and probably ends up winning somehow. Though, of course, it's by no means guaranteed. But when he does take the rook, now it all turns in my favour. Where after d5, I play this check. And then after the king moves, like, he actually resigned here. I mean, if he had kept the game going, I guess it doesn't change much because he just has a bare king. But anyway, after this move here, then we get this situation where now we have basically a 1v1. But because the king is still alive, it means that basically red has just not quite enough points in order to win. If he had 69 points, then he would be able to claim the win, because I would get 40 points extra, but still 68 wouldn't beat 69. But because of that, it means that now, by just a complete fluke and just basically not resigning and combining looking like an idiot with coordinating with the other players only when it was absolutely necessary, in doing this, I actually managed to basically get this winning position. And okay, he didn't play in the best way. Like, I think he did a mouse slip and meant to play the king here. But even now, I think my pawn is going to be a lot faster and should still win, because my pawn promotes when it gets to here, whereas his pawn promotes when it gets to this 8th rank. And obviously when I push my pawn, I'm also going to be covering it with the rook. And the knight is not really good at stopping my passed pawn. So it's going to be a pretty easy win, actually, for me. You know, unless I have some incredibly bad luck with a zombie king, and a zombie king decides to, just by pure chance, play every single move to take my pawn. And I actually did want to lose a solo game like this where the Zombie King basically conspired against me, played every single move they could possibly do to stop me winning in a position where I should have won. Fortunately for me, that didn't happen in this case. And, well, in the game we had king here. And, yeah, once I take the pawn, it's just very easy from this point. Where I just queen my pawn and the game ended with this. And, I mean, the remaining moves are not that interesting, but I'll show it just so you can see how to convert the advantage. Where, you put the... You just want to make sure they don't take any of the pieces, because if he managed to take my rook, he could have claimed the win on the next turn. So you do have to keep in mind the balance. And thankfully, he didn't play the move king d4. Like, I was like 100% sure the king would pick the one square to try and stop me queening my pawn. But fortunately, the Zombie King didn't go against me this time. And the result of this is that, well, I was able to get my pawn queened. And, well, it was pretty easy from here. Like, queen up and... I mean, now, like, it's just a queen and rook. And, okay, my technique was definitely not the best. Like, putting the queen here would have been much more efficient. But, okay, still, by giving checks, didn't really give the guy the time that he needed. And, well, at some point, I used the pin. And yeah, finally, I came up with the right idea of going after the pawn. At some point, like, around here, I just blockaded the pawn, not giving me any counterplay. And, yeah, after this, it was just all over. I think he played on to checkmate, but it didn't really change much, here. And yeah, just a lawnmower mate, takes and this. And yeah, this was the end of the game. Where you can see that I get an extra 40 points because my mate, the one remaining alive player, they also get the Zombie King as well. So yeah, this is a really crazy game. And okay, it's true that with these long games, it does take a while to explain all of the finer points behind it. But I think you can sort of see like the decision I made where you can sort of distinguish between the ones where I deliberately played a stupid looking move, like a move that objectively is just very, very bad, in order to lower my threat level and also to try and make the other players more reliant on me. And also sort of case where I just actually maybe it wasn't really just completely idiotic, like putting my queens on pre. But it's one thing I noticed with Solid, it actually, one of my caveats is actually putting your queen on pre. It's sometimes actually the best move in a position, because when you do it, they sort of think, oh, he just gave a free queen, and they just think you're a complete moron, and they stop trying to attack you in most cases. So it's one interesting point, like when you have more queens on the board, there are certain situations where your best move is actually to blunder your queen, and in doing so, they say, okay, I got the queen, and they stop paying attention to you. So it's kind of funny how that works, but of course, not something I generally do deliberately, because I do try to play at least somewhat reasonable moves as much as possible, unless I have a very good reason not to. Anyway, I hope this game sort of shared to you valuable ideas and sort of how solo chess is very different to even other types of four-player chess and certainly other chess variants as well, where you can see a lot of it is about playing in a way where you try to make the other players reliant on you so that you win. And there are sort of ways that you can do that where you can also kind of sync their game, but not to the point where you sync your own game, where they kind of, you put in a position where they're weak enough that they need your help in order to beat the other guy that's remaining, but they're not sort of so weak that they can't help in a sense. And it's sort of not strong enough to kind of turn their back on you later. It's really a very hard balance. It's something that's kind of, I think, has to be felt kind of from experience. That certainly just listening to a video by itself probably won't give you absolute mastery of it. You kind of have to play the game and sort of feel what your opponent's sort of thinking at the time and what each of the sort of players on each force side, what their kind of mindset is. Because obviously if someone's playing very defensive, or if someone is teaming against you or they're teaming with you, obviously that's going to change very much how you sort of handle that situation. But anyway, I think that, if you guys like this video, or if you enjoyed it and you learned something from it, then certainly leave a like. Leave your comments as well with your own thoughts on four-player chess and solo chess. And also, if you are relatively new to the channel, do make sure to subscribe so you can keep up to date with more of my Grandmaster Chess videos. That's all for now, so thanks for your attention with this video, and I'll see you in the next one.